So this morning I thought that we would talk about and explore the dynamic aspect of silence, just as we went through as thoroughly as possible to describe the fundamental primordial ground, you know, the still silence, the absolute, the infinite, that is before birth and that is after death. It when it reveals itself in your life, there will be a recognition of it and a sense that this birth was for this recognition. You know, it's such a intimate, profound, whole coming home. So I encourage, it's not that you attempt to grab it, you attempt to make it happen. I think that most everyone within this room either has a very deep abiding or a recognition of what I'm attempting to describe. But it is absolute that this is recognized in whatever we're calling this, you know, self-recognition, waking up, coming home, you know, whatever it is. The stability, the stillness, the sense of being home, the attention that has gone out of itself, looking for itself, comes back and can actually fuse and rest with its own nature. And so the whole way of moving through life, totally changes. The nervous system can settle and rest. The ability to, especially if you're quite sensitive, and most spiritual personalities have a real sensitivity, and to be able to move in the world. I mean, you may have preferences of where you want to be or who you want to hang out with, but it's no longer that you can't go anywhere because you're going to be blown out, you know. I remember when I first went to, it was San Francisco, and I was staying with a friend. She was supporting me, and we were talking about something, and I said, well, we could just go to Walmart, you know, and she went, we never go to Walmart, you know. So I guess, I don't know, maybe in San Francisco they don't have a Walmart, but you know, it was just, it was too chaotic, right? And or you know, I can't go here, I couldn't live here, I can't be with this person, I can't stand that. You know, all of that is that we've become so open and so sensitive. In a way, the luminosity, the brightness has become, our antenna has become so vast and broad that, you know, we're picking up everything on this very multiple way, and there's no anchor, there's no real ground, there's no real place to rest, to be stable. And so the wavelets of whatever form that they come in, they become more and more and more impactful. Many years ago when I worked as a medical intuitive, and I talked to people all over the world, but especially in the United States, and I began to talk to people who literally were prisoners in their own home. And part of that was, you know, different illnesses that no one seemed to be able to assist them with holistically or medically. And so in some ways it was having to stay home because of the reactions to what was around them. But many literally were prisoners in their own homes because they had become so open and so sensitive without that sense of anchor, without that sense of stability, that it was too much. It was like, you know, putting your finger in an electrical socket or something. You know, they just They couldn't handle it. If you look at just, electrical system, say as a metaphor, and without the grounding wire, right, it flashes and it sort of blows out, right? It needs the grounding wire. It needs that sense of constancy and that sense of stability.
It won't even work.
Yeah, exactly.
It won't function.
It won't function. Well, and the nervous systems end up not functioning either very well. I have many friends, who are healers or, intuitives, and it just becomes, they just live in a very narrow kind of world and environment. And that's fine. Maybe they're doing their work and that's the only way that can happen. But I know here, when quite spontaneously, I didn't really know about it, I didn't ask about it, I never really consciously anyway read about it, the dark light, the dark ground, the silence just began to show up. And there was a welcoming and a sense of home, and that's not quite true. I know at the beginning when it started to show up, I thought it was kind of boring. I was used to a lot of flash, But that was really only the first time. And then just quite, again, spontaneously, it just began to reveal itself and reveal itself until there was like a full immersion in it, right? There was no location, though it did have a very sense of a gravitational pull, of a letting go, of a relaxing, of a opening, and residing, abiding, whatever words you want to use. But again, the dynamic aspect of stillness is it cannot be separated out, right? Love and silence are really one thing. It's just that the love aspect is the dynamic. It's the movement of silence or stillness. And so to separate that out is, first of all, it's an impossibility, because if you grab a particular position, either love, which is very juicy and wonderful and everyone really likes it, or stillness, which in stillness there is no problem, right? There's nobody there. Relationships, all of that sticky, icky stuff called life, it just no longer is a problem. And so there are those with, they just have a predisposition towards being in silence, or somewhat they're happier in more of an isolated kind of a way. Then there's a subtle mental grabbing of that position, because in some ways it's safer, and in others it's what you've always wanted. But of course, if you're sensitive, you start to see that it becomes kind of dry and a little cold, and relationships kind of aren't possible, they kind of fall out of your life. And so in most cases, there's a kind of a natural curiosity, a natural kind of questioning. Well, what else is there? As my friend Tony, in the work that is coming through him, love it warms the silence, right? It's the dynamic aliveness, the inclusion. Everything is there's nothing that it is not when love begins to wake up and move consciously. So love is just simply it's the Shakti, it's the dynamic aspect. It begins to quite naturally and spontaneously begin to move to know itself and to create itself. You know, some traditions call love the Divine Mother. You know, in that, you know, she's the substance. And she is the, that everything that can be seen, all form, actually, is love. But it's just formulated or created itself as this beautiful image called Marty, right? Or the mountain, or the tree, or the flower. I remember having I don't know what you would call it, I guess a glimpse, very early on when I was with my teacher, and it was just like a curtain pulled open, and everything, with no exception, there was no exception at all, everything was one fabric, and the one fabric was love. Everything. I don't know if you ever went to Sunday school, but you know, we used to have this little, I don't know, little sign or something on the wall when I was really quite young, and God is love. They got that right. Right? They got that right. And then you begin to see that there's no hierarchy or absolutely no difference. In fact, I shared that within the Sangha, and everyone started to kid me about, they had this outhouse, you know, and Sharon could see the outhouse as love, right? You know, well, I did. There was, you know, there was nothing left out. It was all one fabric. Everything is imbued and creates and is formed from love. So when you begin to see that is it's fundamental. It doesn't belong to someone because they're a good person. It has nothing to do with deservability. It has nothing to do with whatever has gone on within your life, or the ancestral or the cultural inheritance that you have taken on. It has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. It's just simply who you are. It's your birthright. It's the cells. It's the bones. It's the skin. And so to look for something, to pine for something that was not given to you maybe as a child in the way that you thought that would have been beneficial, would have been supportive. You know, when you absolutely look at it as the truth that it is, to see that there's, or to lament that there's not enough love, you know, it's an error. It's an error of mind. To say that when you're with a partner and that partner doesn't love you in the way that you deserve or want to be loved, you know, it's just simply a conditioning that is echoing and calling forth, projecting on the other what has not been fully open to and realized at this in this moment, right? To say that there's not enough love is to deny life. So you begin to see you just see it how it is. You just see the actuality of how it is. And then this love begins when you open to this as an actuality. It simply begins to permeate the life. It begins to move into that has not been touched by this love, has not been touched by itself. And love can be actually quite ruthless. And I mean that. And that if allowed, and mentally you can close it out. I didn't think that was possible, but then I started to watch, and it's really quite possible. But if there's a kind of a openness, a willingness, a humbleness, kind of a honesty with yourself, that love will begin to come back for itself, and it will permeate the dark shadows. Though I walk through the valley of death, right? Thou art with me. And it's this love that it isn't like it's, love is nice and so it wants to, help you out. It's its natural movement. It naturally will permeate that has not been touched by itself. Naturally. No one needs to do anything. I remember when it started to really take place here, and there was just a noticing that all of the intention and inquiry and, sort of being a good spiritual warrior, I was trying to look at everything that had not been looked at, and, I was really had a lot of intention around that. And I began to see that there was just these deep-seated patterns here and in my family lineage that just had never been touched, even with all of my intentions and my willingness and, everything that I was applying to my life. It just simply wasn't being touched. And I began to kind of look around, and my friends, some of them were teachers and very mature spiritual personalities. And there were just certain deep patterns that simply were not being liberated. We just became more adept in projecting them or spiritualizing them or, sort of doing something with them. We became more sophisticated. Do you know anyone like that? Like everyone you've met. But something wanted to move deeper, naturally and spontaneously. And so it was like a quality that had not been consciously experienced here that just started to, it was like it just came back for itself. And there was a curious, open, very interested, quite impersonal, but profoundly intimate. That's how it moved. And it just began to move into very, very deep, kind of repressed, hidden patterns. And would just sort of permeate it. And it would come to the surface of awareness. And rather than this kind of wrenching quality that I had experienced before with quite deep patterns that were repressed and then coming to the surface, or that there often was a flurry of judgment or shame or this shouldn't be happening or whatever was accompanying or overlaying these natural arisings of appearance. There was nothing there. There was no judgment. There was no feeling that it should be there or it shouldn't be there. It was just a very loving, kind of welcoming invitation in a way of whatever. And so what had not been able to, had been touched before with, a really strong intention and willingness for everything to be liberated and to be dissolved, both here and for all beings. It began quite spontaneously and on its own to just simply take place. And it was at that same time that the ridiculousness that there was someone who was waking up, that there was this individual waking up. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? Have you come to that? Where it was all about you waking up, all about you becoming clear, all about me, right? And it was necessary at a certain point. But then it began to move that what actually was happening was love was simply moving through all of its creation and permeating and liberating and dissolving and allowing it for it to be freed and to lay down. It was coming up through the collective, all beings. And then in a way, instead of love that was coming back for me, though it did have personal conditionings and personal memories, it was love coming back for itself, and that was for all beings. For the lineage, the ancestral family lineage, culturally, the whole collective was being imbued and permeated, liberated and dissolved by this love. It was really quite stunning to see that. Now, you know, I'm not holding on to this romantic idea that life is going to become, you know, the golden age and everyone is going to be la-la and whatever, you know. I mean, God knows what's going to happen with it all. But there is something that cannot be denied. And if it's waking up within an apparent individual, it's waking up within all beings. How could it be otherwise? How could it be otherwise? And it's not something, again, and I'll say this again, that is deserved or not deserved. It has nothing to do with that. It's your nature. It's the pregnant ground, the silent ground that contains literally everything. There is nothing that does not arise from this fundamental primordial ground. And as it's arising, as it becomes dynamic, it is in love. It's that without conditions. It's that primary, it's that fundamental, and the literal air that you breathe is this love. So then the life begins to move in a very, very different way. You know, the cultivation that may have been beneficial at one time, cultivating, you know, good appearances, you know, cultivating compassion and cultivating loving action and skillful means and, you know, positive thinking and, you know, all of that. That all sort of disintegrates. Cultivate what? This is your nature, and it's infinite. In fact, the more that there is this sort of receiving in a certain kind of way, the more there is just in this allowing and being for this to permeate the life, the more there is. You know, there's this very beautiful, do you know who Alex Gray is? Have you seen his art?
Artist.
Yeah, and he just is, I really find it so beautifully true in how he depicts just sort of the, you know, the natural architecture of our own nature. And he depicts, you know, love, and it sort of spills forth and it comes back out, and then it it comes in even greater than it spills forth. So it's when this is a full cup, my cup runneth over. That's really what it's pointing to. There isn't a depletion. That's how Amma, when she sleeps 2 to 3 hours and does what she does for, in the way that she can do that, is because there's nothing obstructing this reality, this recognition of her and all of ours own nature. Because it's just pouring through. And the more it pours out, the more it increases for it to pour out. We were talking about that yesterday or a couple of days ago, just sort of walking in the, this kind of cold and personal hotel. And you can feel where she abides and what is flowing out of her, the blessing that is flowing out of her. If you were really sensitive, you could probably feel it, miles and miles or everywhere. So the only obscuration to fully living in and as that is there are these unconscious, repressed obscurations, densities, shadows that have not been fully imbued with this love. That's it. It's the only difference between someone like Amma and then someone who is starving for this love. That's the only difference. So then it becomes not so much as a denial of your brilliant awakening if you have to stop maybe and look at something and bring, this love looks at it and brings it to the surface so it can be freed, dissolved. There's a lot of denial within the spiritual communities, a lot of spiritualization. I'm awake and therefore, none of it's true anyway, so I'm just going to ignore it. Deny it. So it actually becomes something quite opposite. It becomes a great blessing. It becomes a great privilege in a way to bring it forth, to let it be liberated, to permeate it by the love that you are, that pours forth from these eyes and from this attention. Where attention is, awareness and love is. Because the recognition is that it isn't just this isolated body that if you get rid of something you're going to be happier. That goes out the window. You begin to see that actually what is brought forth, where this love can fully permeate, benefits all. Benefits all. The me becomes the we. So the burden of having to deal with stuff, look at something, and I'm not saying there's a period where it's pretty relentless. Doesn't feel loving. Like I said, love is relentless, right? fierce. Love can be fierce. But in a certain moment, then it just becomes like a welcoming. And it becomes much different than relieving suffering in this individual life. It becomes much different than that. Much easier. Much easier. Trust that. Much easier. And then it becomes just kind of a simple noticing. Ah. Ah. Welcome. Welcome. All come unto that. With no exception. No exception. So this love then becomes that does not turn on and does not turn off. It cannot turn off. It just simply is, right? It just simply is. That had been my prayer for a long time because I knew that that wasn't true here. I really recognized that that was not true here. Though I had a fairly open, tolerant, sort of mind, I guess you'd call it that. A natural curiosity and interest in others. This love that was being experienced definitely turned on and definitely turned off. But I knew that there was something else. And so many, many, many years, I'd be in the Sangha or some spiritual community or whatever, and I'd hear these people and they'd talk about these sort of glorious, ways of experiencing love, and all this is happening, and it just wasn't happening here. It just wasn't happening. So I just kept praying. And then one time in a Zindo, of all places, it just turned on. It just started to reveal itself of what it actually was. This wonderful kind of ecstatic, loving, it's so vast I could never contain it. Of course you could never contain it. That was an expression of it, but this was something much more, fundamental, I guess you would call it. It was the natural state. It was the expression of the natural state. Profoundly, unbelievably ordinary, and unfathomable, unimaginably extraordinary, all at once. So really, it's the simple turning to it. Where your attention is, love and awareness pours through. And then just simply beginning to recognize the actuality of it. And if there's any obscuration, in any kind, in any form, the willingness for love to turn back for itself. And it will dissolve it, liberate it. Often you'll find the very, very deep-seated patterns There almost has to be like, you know, a child, if you've ever been around a little tiny child and the child has been brought up in a home perhaps that they've not experienced this loving support. And if it's frightened, you know, and it will, or kitten, I know cats better than I know dogs, and so a cat, they'll hide underneath something. They'll hide. And so in order to, you know, coax them out, you have to, you know, be kind of quiet and welcoming and sit with them and almost like mimic, you know, what they're doing, and you know, kind of enter into their space and just say, sweetheart, what is it? Can you, like a child, can you tell me what you've never been able to actually speak before? I'm here for that. Can you express what you have not been able to ever express before? I'm here for that. So sometimes, you know, it helps to, you know, play this little, almost like a little game with this that has hidden itself deep within the psyche. Those are the ones that are running the whole separate life. Those are the ones that are driving the life that believes it's cut off from this love. So sometimes you have to coax and welcome and listen and be available. And then others, it's just simple unnoticing. Ah, there it is. Every relationship I've ever been in has a similar result. I wonder what the one constancy is. Moi? Give that to love. Love sees that, imbues that, permeates that, maybe is informed, and then liberates. And it is no more. You know, it's like a moth to the flame. All that is not imbued with this light, with this love, comes, it attempts to come back into itself, to be burnt up. Make no exception to that. Hold nothing back to that. I'm sure you've heard this story many times, and it's an old story, you know, old Zen story. And often, especially in the Taoist tradition, there'd be a lot of discord within the village, and so they'd invite a Taoist master to come, and they often even would have a cabin or something, you know, for the priest or the Taoist master to hang out, because just their presence, there would be a reorchestration, a reharmonization that would happen then within the discord within the village. And so he goes to town and he does his thing, you know, and picks up matches and things that he needs, you know, his food. And he comes back and the cabin is burning, and he whips out the box of matches and he starts, and he goes, burn faster, faster, faster. Right? That's how it happens. You add fuel to this burning, and you want it to be burnt all the way through. all the way down. And then something else occupies this body, this life. There truly is a change and a shift of occupancy, truly. It's not just kind of a spiritual idealism. What used to reside here is no longer. And something else reveals itself. And it's why you've taken this birth. So fear not. So, question? Anyone have anything they'd like to? Yeah, you wanna?
Wonderful microphone.
Mm-hmm. Looks really official.
I get a sense with this question that, it's really this seeing myself, as separate still, and someone is waking up.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting challenge is in Montrose, which is a pretty lily-white little town, I have 3 direct neighbors that are all, from what I can tell, meth users, and one probably a dealer. And it's been really challenging to find a way of, I don't know if the word embrace that, And one set of the kids kind of are starting to worry me, like, they might cause problems with my place, and it's been a real challenge.
I think he's saying bring that up a little closer to your mouth. It's the old ice cream cone pointer. Well, being loving doesn't have to include destructive actions. You know what I'm saying? Love can be, very, could say stop. That's as loving as something that goes, invites. So, you can perhaps open to maybe what is driving these young people. I assume they're young, I don't know. I thought, but anyway, these people to do what they're doing, a sense of lack, it's usually money. And having to make your money in that way that causes harm to other comes from a sense of lack, right? So, you can see that. But loving can also, turn them in. And because, you're stepping into something that can cause harm both to you and to others. So I think that's kind of a misguided idea that we have to take on, being in a relationship, perhaps, that is quite critical or quite demeaning because we're trying to be loving. Living next door to someone that could be harmful to you, to them, to others. So love can be very firm, to be able to say no as easily as you can say yes. Stop as easily as you can welcome. So I don't know if we all kind of got that from some sort of the misguided Christian teachings. I mean, even though Jesus, was quite fierce at times, right? He knocked over tables and, did all sorts of things. So I don't know where we got that, but I think love can be really quite precise. And this is not acceptable.
And it's also, there's a lot of judgment creeping in, and that's the part I'm trying to be looking at too.
Well, good. Then look at that. That's extra. Look at those young guys, whatever that is. Just look at that. Do you look at other people in your life with that kind of hierarchy and that kind of qualification? And they just are bringing up sort of an exaggerated way of looking at your judgment. So that's the gift to you, is to look at that. That's why I encourage to really sort of extend that sense of compassion of probably what's driving those actions. You know, it's usually a very profound sense of lack. And this is not acceptable within my environment. Do you see that? Judgment is always superfluous. It's after what is. Do you hear what I'm saying?
It comes after what's happened.
That's right. Right. Yeah. You know, the human condition in most cases is going to have opinions, you know, ideas about things. It's just there's no one in there that believes them and hangs on to them. They just rise and do their thing and then go down. But judgment, you know, is, for most of us, it's still a function of the separate mind. Did you ever read, what's her name, Jill Bolte Taylor? The Stroke of Insight. And I thought that was so brilliant because she took it out of the spiritual, you know, context, and just the left brain, its function is to separate and to create hierarchies and linear kind of function, right? And so when she started to get back the left brain function for reading and numbers and whatever, judgment came back. I thought that was really fascinating. But she had lived in that kind of that kind of right brain where nothing was ever disconnected, where judgment doesn't arise. And then she could see that it was just a function. And then she didn't accept when the judgmental mind started to come back in, along with her ability to know math and to be able to read. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? So it's just seeing it for what it is. It's a function that may be good for doing math, but it's not a function for living in the world. Judgment. Do you sense how it feels in your body when you're judging? That's a beautiful feedback as well.
Usually, I don't know if more judgment, but when I'm going more mental, there's a naughtiness.
Yeah. And it's the same when you're being quite judgmental. There's a quality that moves through your body. And that becomes that kind of that feedback loop. It doesn't feel good.
I might add that when I'm being analytical, it's more here naughty, but it does move down a little bit towards the heart center if I'm paying attention. When I'm being judgmental, where it's more of a stronger judgment.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, again, you don't need to change anything. It's a noticing. It's just a noticing. And the noticing itself informs. So. Yeah, one of the more successful TV series was all about was it Breaking Bad? You know, that's great. Yeah, I heard it was just great. I saw the guy a little bit. I hadn't seen it, but he just looks like a really good actor. So isn't that interesting? You know, something that we normally call the, you know, the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. You know, and here he made millions. The series. I don't know if he made millions as a meth dealer. You just never know. Anyone else just have a, yeah, Moses.
Thank you. I have a comment about what he said, and then I have a question. I'm an ex-meth user.
Yeah.
When I was about 16, I went into drugs and I went all the way.
Yeah.
A
lot of people did.
I wouldn't encourage anybody to try meth. I don't know how come I'm still alive and everything, but the times I was on the bottom, and first of all, what happened to me, everybody left me alone because nobody wanted to have anything to do with me. And for me personally, was probably some of the most, like the biggest progress I've made was during those times. I wouldn't sleep for days, so my mind eventually just, most of your brain would just shut down. So I would become very primitive, my thinking and everything. And Alan Watts had said that there are two things we should all consider through our lives. One is to consider death. Imagine that one day I'm going to fall asleep and never wake up again. The other thing was that I'm the worst person there is, like the lowest, the worst there is. So to me, what helps me with not to judge is that I know I'm probably worse than anybody I know. Like I've done.
Can I jump in for a second and then you can continue? You know, really, I think though where that is pointing to, it's not personal, and that's what I was going to ask you. Did it feel personal, or is we all contain all of that? There's not one of us that does not contain all of that.
Well, I've always kind of thought that our people must be better than me.
Well, you know, we all secretly feel that on some level or the other, or we're better than everyone else, depending on how we're wired, right? Or both. Yeah, we go fluctuate, you know, back and forth. But I do encourage, you know, it's not personal. But if you don't include that everything is within this, then that's something that love can't touch. So please go ahead.
So what I'm trying to say is, like, there is no such thing as point of no return. I think in spirituality there's nobody's like hopelessly lost or
absolutely not
their path. And also it's just like yesterday, before I had to say something about thought, my hand is shaking right now. And now when there's something coming up in me that it needs to say, and I'm like, I don't want to talk. I just want to say as quiet as possible and go. There's just like this things like my heart would start beating real hard, and because I'm resisting something that's trying to come out. I'm like,
I know.
So what is that about?
Well, we've spent our entire life resisting and putting it down and compensating and projecting and denying, and for a good reason. It's often very, very painful. It's a very painful experience. That's why it was pushed down and repressed and denied and projected. But, you know, to open to that you are, which is this love that is unconditional. There are no conditions, period, end of story. It moves naturally to touch and permeate those very deep-seated wounds. That's its nature. It comes back for itself. And to the ease and the beauty and the welcoming of that. That's why I'm encouraging to really look at that within yourself. To open to that love that is your birthright. And it's not some spiritual, sweet, saccharine, idealistic thing. It's the actuality of who you are and everyone else. So it makes it so much easier. But until then, when it's trying to come up in the best way that you can, just say, what is it, sweetheart? What is it that wants to be finally freed? I'm here. Because you're the fount of that love, my friend. That's what I'm saying. There is no deservability. There's no one who deserves it more than the other. It has nothing to do with it. In fact, I mean, those of us who are champion sufferers sometimes opened up quicker and more easily because the suffering was so intense and there was nothing to lose. It's sometimes people who are dreaming these very lovely and beautiful dreams that won't take these risks to look deeply. because they don't want to mess up their beautiful dream. So I mean that, I've met people who there was nothing to lose, and they were the ones who brilliantly, beautifully woke up. I mean, you were sitting there and you listened to a video of Adyashanti's, and you recognized your nature.
Yeah, and that night I was ready to die in a way I'm not ready to die today.
Well, hey-ho.
After that, I kind of rebuilt my life, and my life is much nicer now than it was then.
Yeah.
And then if Dad had walked into that room and said, hey, let's go, I would not even ask a question, just got up and left.
Yeah.
Right now, I'd be like, but I got to
You got a nice life now.
Yeah, now I'm enjoying it a lot more.
Therein lies the danger. And it does all the time. Does all the time. Hey, I don't believe my stories anymore. And hey, I'm a pretty good meditator. I'm doing pretty good. And then something locks down. Just see it, that's what's happening. There is nothing that you will lose. Nothing. No dream is greater and more whole and more complete and more free and more beneficial than the recognition of your own nature and the living of it. No dream is worth it. It's like a fragment in air compared to reality in its most profound and infinite expression. So don't buy into that. It's beautiful that you see that. Many, many don't. Many don't.
So this morning...
There is no stopping place.
Well, like a millisecond before I woke up, there was again knowing of that other me, the other self.
Yeah.
That I've noticed just a couple of times in very extreme situations.
Yeah.
At night, and a few months after that experience, I was living as if I'm invincible, like physically.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I ended up hurting myself because in my head I believed I'm invincible. So I rolled in a car. Yeah. I was speeding really bad in Steamboat where there's mountain roads. So I went off the road, the car rolled and everything, and that was again, in an instant, I knew my other self, because the mind was nowhere to be found.
That's right.
Just cocked up and it just made a mess and left.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, that happens all the time in deep emergencies. That's when people often recognize their nature, because, the greater being or whatever you want to call that pops out, and because the mind's shut down, right? Yeah. It happens all the time.
So I heard that some people have some kind of awareness remaining throughout the night as the body's asleep. So this morning, about a millisecond before I woke up, that self was like, okay, I'm waking up into a dream.
Beautiful.
And then I woke up and my mind started its daily show and it went on, and then the rest of it, and then
perfect. It's those moments that just start to then just become all one thing. So just notice, and notice all day long, no matter what's happening, what knows that that's happening. What knows that you're thinking? What knows that there's chaos? What knows that you're uncomfortable? What knows that the heart is beating in fear of something that's trying to release itself? What is that? All day long. All day long. And then that appearance of coming and going, of this and then this, it dissolves. It cannot maintain itself anymore. What knows you're going to sleep? What knows that you're waking up? Just bring the attention to that is awake and aware and recognizes absolutely everything that's going on in this life. Just wake up to that. Bring your attention to that. And then it starts to attention, reality, fuses. Becomes one thing. And then Moses and his personality, some of it will just totally fall away. Others, parts of the personality will be used to be of benefit. Others will just be this wonderful eccentric Moses. I mean, I have an incredible neurotic personality, and a lot of it doesn't appear it's ever going to go away. Ask my husband. But it doesn't stick. It's not believed. It's kind of part of the spice. So you don't throw yourself away, your uniqueness and your beauty and all that you've gathered along the way. None of that is thrown away. It's all utilized to serve itself, to be of benefit, to come back out and then serve all beings. I like people who have lived large.
I'd actually like to go offline.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Wow, it's interesting. I totally forgot.
It still picks up your voice, you know, but we just don't hear it as well because it's picking it up through her mic.
Oh.
She wants to turn it off.
Well, I can't turn her mic on.
Can you pause the video?
Oh, yeah, I can pause the video, sure.
Oh, well, just a moment.
Just a moment. Okay, I'd like to sort of hear any questions or reports or any comments, anything that's been happening. Looks like there's going to be sun tomorrow, right? We can actually see a little bit, huh? Yeah, it is gorgeous.
The sun set exactly when he finished his chant.
Ah, perfect. Couple of days in, there should be something cooking, huh? How are you? Well, that was probably an unfair question. So something seems to have settled.
I've been feel like I've been digging and cleaning house today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just so many things came up, and just old stuff, traumas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just
very skillful use of time being here to do that.
Yeah, the meditation time was just priceless.
Perfect. Great.
And I had maybe a week or two ago, I was doing a meditation at home and had this where I just expanded and just kept going and going and going, but I could still see that pinpoint of light where I started from. And I would open my eyes and close my eyes just to kind of carry it with me, to experience it with my eyes open and closed back up. But then today, when I was meditating, I wouldn't even call it meditating, I was just being and trying to allow all that stuff that was coming up to come up and like you said, meet it with love, and was doing that. And finally, I just felt really tired, and I just...
It's relentless.
And I just asked Yeshua, you know, I said, because I don't hardly ever ask. You know, I'm always needing to do my own thing for my own self. And I just asked, you know, can you just show me just a little bit of the truth? You know, I've been moving through all this garbage, you know, can I just see some truth? And it was just instantaneous. This expansion just started. And there was no pinpoint of light. It was just the expansion. It was just the expansion. And it was so strange because I don't remember it ending. You know, I never came back in.
Why come back in?
Well, before when it's happened, I've always come back in, But this time it was just, it just was there, and then all of the, not all of, I guess it was just a lessening of the emotional tie to things and stuff like that.
Beautiful. Really, really, really deep and good work. Beautiful. Your wisdom shining through and directing in the way that it has. Isn't it? Aren't you kind of in awe of it, actually?
Yeah. And I knew it was going to be a good day when I woke up this morning because I didn't have the depression that usually follows the anxiety.
Perfect.
Even though I didn't get a lot of sleep for the last couple nights, It's just like I woke up and I just felt kind of here.
Good.
So.
Really happy to hear that.
Me too. Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you for creating the space for that.
Good work. Yeah. It's your wisdom at play. It's your wisdom. There's a brightness there. Anyone else? Just, yeah, Tony.
I wanted to try and share some imagery which came up in your guided meditation.
You want to share what you shared with me at dinner?
Well, I could do that too. Yeah, I said to Sharon that she's got to stop having these guided meditations right before dinner because it's playing hell with my digestion system.
And I just thought of that. I was walking to dinner. I thought, oh God, Tony's not going to be able to eat again tonight. Going to have to change that time.
Anyway, I'll try and recall this. It's not for the sake of not remembering it. It's just sometimes it's just too strong to repeat. But it was there was an image of like surrendering the body. And it was actually into a flower which took it into the ground, and then it was like the soul left and became a butterfly, and it was flying, and then it was like a kind of a reverse zoom shot of this world, and then going out and out and out forever, it seemed like, and then there was the mother, like huge, and this butterfly is flying, and it's trying to land on her eyelashes, and it's like bouncing up and down on the eyelashes, and the mother is just giggling like a baby, and then this butterfly flies out and goes into her eye, then it comes out and it's kind of connected to a teardrop. And it's falling, and then it tries to kind of separate from the teardrop, and then as it does that, it's back in the eye again, and there's another teardrop, and then it's falling, and then there's a realization that then again kind of going almost like going away from the mother, that there's no falling happening at all. It's just all within the mother. And then the butterfly drinks the teardrop. And then just becomes the mother.
The continuum. Is there an insight with that came through as well?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's just still very strong.
Yeah. Just like this, huh?
Well, there was a point too where the butterflies, the first time, is like butterflies looking in the teardrop and seeing its reflection.
Yeah.
And it tries to kind of separate from that.
And
then it has to like totally take it all in.
Take it all in. Yeah.
So it was just the oneness.
Yeah. Beautiful, Tony. Yeah. Then the disorientation is settled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a lot less disorienting than yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have to let it do its thing. It knows exactly how to be. You know, that's the great good news.
Yes, meditation has been a lot more easy today.
Yeah, good. Anyone else have anything?
I had a funny experience this morning.
Uh-huh.
In the church, actually. I felt some strong feeling after breakfast to run up there, and I went in, and it was kind of like, what am I supposed to do here? So I kind of wandered for a little bit and felt drawn to the right-hand side.
Huh.
I'm not Catholic, and I don't know how
Yeah.
churches are really laid out.
Uh-huh.
But there's, a light hanging over, and of course that's where they keep the Eucharist.
Ah.
And so I stood in front of it for a while, and I was kind of like, am I allowed to go in there? I don't know. And I just looked around, and nobody could see me, so.
I'm going to check it out.
Plus it was kind of like this magnet.
Mm-hmm.
And when I entered the space where, this is also bizarre because I don't generally go in for material objects having energies.
Yeah.
It's not something, I'm sensitive to energies in my body, but certainly not in
In
stuff
us.
so
Mhm.
much.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the most charged space that I've ever been in my life.
Is that
I
how
thought
beautiful?
that I looked and I thought I was like, is that thing plugged in? there's light switches on the
Yes.
wall, and there's like some plugs on the wall, and I was like, maybe there's a short circuit in this room, and somehow it absolutely blew my mind. I had no idea that such a thing was possible.
Uh-huh.
And so I sat with that for a little while because it was a very familiar quality of energy which I experience in my own body.
Beautiful. I was going to ask you, how did it resonate for you?
Yeah, well, it's definitely extremely familiar to me from meditation, and then there it was on the outside. And so I guess they must, someone who's Catholic can explain all of this to me, but I guess it's kind of in this like urn sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks exactly like a funeral urn full of ashes.
Mm-hmm.
And it suddenly struck me like, oh, I get it. It's like, this is my body, which is broken for you. And there it is, and it's a magnet, And so it's kind of like the same materiality that I find in my own body is there resonating with the same
Gorgeous
frequency.
insight.
And
Very potent insight.
so that was quite astonishing to me because I've never really experienced it outside of myself.
No
so
in,
it's
no out.
no in, no out.
There.
Which I have a sense of in my meditation otherwise, but this was I've always experienced that as a very subtle thing, and this was so literal. It was kind of like not subtle at all.
Great.
It was like there's a bunch of stuff and it's glowing. you know. And this is a bunch of stuff and it's the same, and it doesn't actually matter how coarsely I experience it at this moment.
Gorgeous. Really a beautiful insight. Beautiful insight.
So that was my morning.
Mm-hmm. This is my body.
And I was like, oh, thanks. Thanks for sharing your body with me.
It's always important to say thanks.
No, I mean, I'm being facetious, but actually there's a lot of gratitude that comes up.
I'm going to say
from that.
it's very important.
It's actually quite an intense gratitude that,
Yeah.
and the sacrifice is a little bit less problematic because it's,
Yeah.
there's not really a sense of sacrifice. It's just this very open-handed,
Mhm.
it's just what matter is. It's just
Yeah.
what stuff is.
Beautiful.
But somehow still it's offered at every level.
Yeah. Beautiful. Wonderful. It's life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Very surprising.
Yeah. Thanks. A night of reports. Yeah.
It was To follow up on that, yesterday, I think it was after our first satsang, I was feeling kind of constricted and not in tune with anything. And so I stepped outside, and it was beautiful outside. It was just foggy, and it was so easy to imagine infinite stillness and silence going out into the universe, because the mist just made everything blend into each other. And so as I stood there, kind of feeling less in tune with everything than I wanted to, suddenly I started hearing all the different sounds. There were birds, and there were just all kinds of wonderful sounds happening, and the wind, and the energy was everywhere. It was just, the energy of the universe was permeating everything, and I was totally in tune with it suddenly. And this whole week, these last 2 days has been, I think Julie's the one who said that I'm always the one that comes and goes, I don't think there's anything I can learn this time. What more is there? And every time at the end, I'm like, I can't believe how much more there was. And so this week has been this awareness of not just the mind going like this, but the whole body going with it.
There you go.
And then, shoo,
there you go.
And then, shoo,
absolutely.
And then, shoo.
Beautiful.
Just constantly, and yet not fighting it and not being afraid of it.
Perfect.
So,
it's been, all is included, right?
Yeah.
All is included.
And years ago, I think some people in here have probably heard this story when I first sat with Sharon, and she went, you can live life like this, or you can live like this. And I literally burst into tears and cried for the next hour. And then another time when I sat with her, and she said, let go, stay open. And I did for months, and it was amazing. And now this time, it's like the movement is come inside and down. You talked about the body a lot last year. And I've started finally getting what you meant.
Great, yeah.
And so it's much easier this year to come in and down and settle, physically as well as mentally, as well as the true essence. And then
it's all the same.
Expand from there.
Right. It's all the same, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're discovering. Yeah. It can't be separated out. We tried
do
for
our
thousands
hardest to
of
make
years.
it separate.
Yeah, the mind is very good at that.
Yeah. But so once again, there's so much more to see, to know, it's still the mind grasping to know it, but just to experience. Yeah.
It's without end.
I believe it.
So good that you're here. Yeah, good that you're here.
Well,
hey,
I had
Michael.
Dokuson today. What?
I said our friend Michael. Yeah. I heard you singing in the hallway. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Today has been just a kind of rebirth. Just, I've been suffering for months with fatigue. Just having to husband my energy very closely and letting it control my life, constrain my life. And just today, which started off with Dokuson and came back, meditated, and there's just been this upwelling of energy, joy. Music's coming out in spite of everything, the silence and lack of anything to say, but just crazy Grateful Dead music. And
it was nice. I liked doing it.
and then after dinner, I went for a walk,
And it was just so, so lovely. And there was a sense of a kind of self-consciousness. You know, I was just walking and stopping and observing, and it was like I stopped. I wondered, you know, why was I stopping now? Why was I moving now? And sometimes I would know, you know, I would listen for something new, something caught my ear, something, you know, the birds, the leaves, not the leaves, the sunbuds, you know, something, you know. And it was like being in a museum and feeling like something was watching, something was appreciating what was offered through me.
There you go.
And like,
beautiful.
You know, it was moving me. It was like
gorgeous,
determining the pace, the movement.
Gorgeous.
And, you know, Sharon asked me in Dokuson, if I realized that that my experience of the silence was the silence, was if I realized that I was not separate from it or something like that. And I was saying, well, you know, this is pretty new for me. I think that's an experience into the future when I'll realize it. I didn't say it. Those are not the exact words. That's the sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm thinking now, realizing through this opportunity to share that in some sense that's what I was experiencing outside, that nature was appreciating itself through me.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, something like that.
Yeah. It's the change of occupancy, right? The change of occupancy. Instead of, you know, there's someone named Michael that's looking, and once in a while there's a sort of a glimpse of something that seems to be, you know, life itself kind of glimpses through. Or when it is predominantly life itself, the essence, the one that's, you know, you said it beautifully, I don't remember exactly how you said it, and it's looking through this beautiful expression called Michael. So this becomes prominent, and this becomes the vehicle that it can express itself. It's a beautiful transition when that takes place in one's life. I'm very happy to hear this. Very happy to hear this. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So in Dokuson, we kind of ended with something that I didn't fully get. You know, something about you don't take the world, like the reflection from the world, as guidance anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was something about doubt, and I mentioned like how like not like if somebody says something and it causes doubt to arise. I don't know, it got confused, but then I kind of, you know, reflected on it.
Look what doubt what actually doubt is, rather than doubt about someone saying something. Doubt is arising. What's driving the doubt? Do you remember that?
See, that's the part I don't get.
You know, we look for the outside as, as a reflection, right?
Right.
And so when someone may say something and there's doubt, then the mind's attention goes out and it tries to figure it out, or it, projects it because it doesn't know how to deal with it, or it blames. So whatever the mind's tendencies, it will react then to this arising of doubt. It's a trigger, right? An arising of doubt.
It's dealing with the doubt as opposed
So it's dealing with the doubt instead of the old compensating behaviors, which is ignoring it, projecting it, resenting it, whatever it is that the mind's going to do. So it's just right here. There's just one thing going on. So instead of looking out there in whatever form, the attention just comes back and what is that? What actually is happening here?
So it's like
What's
seeing
being,
the hook.
It's seeing the hook. Perfectly said. It's seeing the hook. And just by being curious and by looking and opening to what's actually trying to liberate, that's the whole movement. It's attempting to become conscious and free itself. It's attempting to liberate. So it's attended to.
And there's another thing that came up, sort of like as I was trying to figure it out. Sort of like there's a way in which we can kind of be reacting to the world and kind of trying to, I don't know, find our place or move in response to what shows up. And then kind of the sense that I got was that maybe the intention, I mean, sometimes this experience happens where it's like, okay, maybe the initial indicators are like, no, this isn't right. Like the external signs say no, and then, but then there's something else that's clear that doesn't get hooked on that.
Right.
And so then it just moves the way it moves.
Exactly.
And then maybe later, who knows when or if ever, then like the external starts to reflect that.
Well, it will. See if I'm tracking you. I was right with you right until the last. So the external reflects what? Just going with what is, which is the wisdom moving, or it reflects a trigger that happens.
Well, I mean, there's always the challenges, so there's the next opportunity to hook on to something, right?
Right.
But
if it doesn't hook on.
Yeah, but if it doesn't hook on, like you kind of make a clear decision, clear movement.
Yeah.
Then like maybe it makes a lot of noise at first, like the external reflection, but then like later on you get some report that like.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And at least here, the experience, and that's all I can share, is the more there's just this sort of the natural movement with what is, and not the projection, not the, whatever it is that the mind wants to do, then you just begin to see more and more and more that the inner and the outer actually is, it matches, it reflects each other. And it reflects that cohesiveness, it reflects that sort of a harmonization. No matter what's happening, there's a harmonization. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? So it does, it always is a perfect reflection. But when it's just pure movement, pure speaking, pure walking, pure action, without the trigger and the breakdown and the reactions, then the whole thing starts to just be this harmonic flow, this harmonic reflection of one another. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
starting to, as you were speaking, it became more clear.
Yeah, yeah. No matter what's happening, the harmonic being is really has nothing to do with the outside circumstances. That's what you start to find.
Yeah, so like even the discord in a way is a reflection. Like you're saying that, so you can start off like it looks chaotic, and then like as you more live with
just
or
movement,
as truth,
right? As truth.
Then there is a sort of reflection of that, and like even if it looks
Exactly.
and maybe from the outside it might look sort of chaotic, but there's still
But the inner is harmonic.
right.
Beautiful. That's exactly what I have found and what others have reported. So that's why there is this sense of well-being with all situations, all people, and all circumstances. That's how that can happen. You can't control what's happening on the outside, but you can be in peace with it. And then there's a kind of informing. That moment informs. You know how to move. You may know even what to say. You know when to move away, right? You know when to come closer. The only obscuration are appearances or conditionings that are coming up that then cloud or distort actually what is. So that's why, just don't waste your time. Bring it back here. What is that? What's actually happening here? Because that's what it's asking for. And then it resolves or dissolves, and then now there's the inner and the outer is same. It truly does reflect. It's very difficult.
I'm just trying to track it in experience, so
yeah. Yeah, well, you'll find your way with it. Mostly, I think you just start to notice that things smooth out, and there's a seamless quality in your life, and you're not affected by circumstances, really. You're not affected by those around you, particularly. And it isn't like you've pulled away somewhere. It's just you're in this abiding as well-being. It's a harmonization that starts to take place within your life, because the obscurations are no longer believed.
yeah, you're not getting distorted.
You aren't getting distorted. It literally is just energy. And the distortion is the appearances that have not been fully imbued with this consciousness, with this awareness, with this love. That it's flowing through you. Your attention is that. Right? There's only one thing going on. In your meditation, could you sense, certain maybe little shields or gaps or little divisions that are within the system? Could you sense that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all that's asked for. Like you don't have to do anything. It's just noticing, bringing attention to it. And on its own, it starts to reveal itself, it starts to untie, it starts to liberate.
I guess I do too much a lot of the time.
Yeah, well, that's the mind, right? It'll relax because it realizes it really isn't doing anything. That's what finally relaxes it. But you know, the mind likes to think about it and look at it, you know, and that's cool. That's fine. That's good.
What about invoking?
Invoking?
Yeah.
You know, here there's an invoking by almost like an inner communion, because as you so ask, so shall you receive. As you speak, there is a hearing, you're hearing yourself, and there's a response. So here, that's what evoking is. You may have your own way of seeing that. But, you know, there's just this sort of deep sense of intimate communion here. And so when you want to evoke, you know, it's really a kind of a prayer. But it's a prayer that does this instead of a prayer that, you know, beseech, help me God. You know, it's more like a speak, and there is a hearing, and then there's a response to that. What's your view of invoking?
Only that it seems to be possible, and
yeah.
Sometimes it's sometimes if I'm totally caught in a loop,
yeah,
then trying to look for anything within that loop, you know, like
doesn't work.
Doesn't work. So it's like to invoke. It's sort of like it's calling on a broader knowing, you know, but it's not the knowing that's in the loop. It's like
right, but it is yourself, right? But it's just not the one that's caught into the loop, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's not the constricted. Yeah, perfect. But you aren't evoking, you know, some God somewhere in the sky, you know, to come in and help you.
It's hard to say.
Well, you know, it's helpful just to see that, you know, as this is spoken, there's an intelligence and a wisdom that hears and responds. And what happens is that we often, then our attention is somewhere else when there's a response. So we think that it's actually, you know, it's not working or it's not happening. But actually, it's actually perfect. So as you evoke, then just be present when it responds.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying now. Like, or maybe I do. Like, it's not like you're waiting on somebody else's favor.
No.
Like it's immediate.
It's immediate. I mean, you know, maybe not in your mind's timing.
Right.
But there's always a response. Always a response. That's why, you know, when we're, you know, it's sort of a desperation, and you know, it's like this big prayer, and it's full of sincerity, and it's true, and there's this charge. It always responds. Always responds. But again, it isn't some distant God over there that hands out favors. It just responds. Its own being, its own nature hears and responds. Your nature, your own being responds. It's so vast. It's all so vast. How could it be if you asked that it wouldn't respond? Right? How could that ever be?
Well, by analogy, it seems like when people feel I don't know, when I feel clearer, then like there's more of a capacity to respond.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, in ultimate clarity, how could there not be ultimate or inconceivable capacity to respond?
Yeah. True. But I know I've been on my knees in tremendous desperation and just, please! And there's been a response. But I hear you. I hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's an immediate clarity when it comes from immediate clarity. Yeah.
Didn't know if I had anything to say, but what you guys are saying really
is interesting.
Is relevant. And incidentally, this is about how you should hold a mic this close to your mouth, like a rock star. There's a verse in the Gita which says, you have control over action alone, never over its fruits. Live not for the fruits of action, nor attach yourself to inaction. And what I find is that I feel like there's this sort of evolutionary force that's much bigger than me that's operating through me.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels like individual ambition, but individual ambition is sort of a reflection of that evolutionary force, perhaps distorted somewhat, perhaps not. And but I there's nothing wrong with desire and aspiration and ambition and all those things. Those are steps of progress. Of course, they can go awry, and if they're not really in tune with that evolutionary force, then can get you into trouble. But the more attuned you are to that evolutionary force, then the more appropriate they are, and hopefully the more readily they're fulfilled. And what I find is that I feel driven a lot of the time. I mean, I just feel like there's this evolutionary force that's motivating me, but if I kind of let that draw me out into the world, then it loses its efficacy or its potency. And so the more I want something, if it seems to be thwarted in some way or not getting fulfilled quickly or something, the more I want it, the more I cook it inwardly.
I was going to say, because the wanting contain tremendous lack.
Take it into the transcendent.
That's right.
And let it cook there. And sometimes the cooking can be fairly intense. There can just be this resolve that sort of resides at a deep level. And it's like you guys were alluding to, sort of begging something that's external to you for the fulfillment of this or that. But that's not where the switchboard is. Excuse me. That's not where you're gonna push the button that's gonna make it happen. And that's not to say you can just sit around with your eyes closed and expect everything to happen either. Action is necessary, like that verse says. Don't attach yourself to inaction. But the analogy Maharishi always used to use was that if you want to shoot an arrow, you can't just put it on the bow and let go; it'll just fall to the ground. You have to pull the arrow back.
That's right.
And when it's fully pulled back, then it will fly forward with the maximum velocity. So, pulling the arrow back is what we're doing on this retreat, and something that's good to do on a daily basis.
Yep.
But like Nate was saying, that Prem Baba seems to be saying that things are heating up, and now it's April.
Yes.
And we are all instruments in this process that's happening. We don't know quite what the implications or the extent of it will be, but I think many people feel like something's going on, and it seems to be moving in my veins.
Yes.
It seems to be part of me. And how can I help? How can I serve? What can
That's
I do
question.
to facilitate this?
That's right. That's the question.
And so I think it's kind of a matter of keeping a balance. there's some saying in some Vedic scripture that about the lamp at the door that stands between the absolute and the relative, and kind of looks in both directions and illuminates them both, and that's where you want to take your stand. You know,
beautiful, yeah.
And so, just I'm getting a little long-winded now, but just got to keep that kind of proper proportion between outer dynamism and inner directedness, and the two can be balanced and reconciled, and in such a way that they enrich and support one another, and then life flows most smoothly. And
absolutely. It's in harmony.
It's a harmony, yeah. And when they're out of proportion, you know, you can get so inner-directed that you're totally incapable of doing anything in the outer. You're talking about, you know, people in spiritual circles who can't go to Walmart, stuff like that.
Exactly.
You know,
can't leave their apartment.
Yeah, can't leave their apartment. So there's an imbalance, and then of course, perhaps more commonly, are the people who are so caught up in the outer that they're oblivious to the inner, and so we're kind of in a process, all of us, of trying to find the proper balance between the two. And that's an ongoing process. It's like riding a bicycle. You know, you have to keep balancing, but the more you do it, the more second nature it becomes.
I have a question about all that, because when I was talking to you about asking Yeshua, I have had a relationship with Christ since I was a small child. I literally saw Christ
Beautiful.
as a small child, and of course, my grandmother was a psychic, and her response to that was to clear the energy in my room and make sure that nothing could get back in.
Oh,
I know. Yeah.
But it was Christ.
Right. But it was But and I've had a lot of those experiences throughout my life. And even with my own compass, I don't feel like I could ever give up my love affair with Christ. You know what I mean? Even though it feels like...
Why would you want to?
Right, but I mean, when I was listening to what you were saying about not looking outside, I don't feel like Christ is out there somewhere.
That's just what I was going to say. You know, what you recognize, it is within. You know, it's the Christ that wakes up within. And there also was this gorgeous, amazing, stunning master called Jesus that embodied that.
Right.
And so one can respect and love and have a beautiful relationship. But there's not an idea that you're this, poor sinner and here's this, master, and it's out there and you're here.
Right.
That's the error.
No, it's always, whenever I meet with them, it's always been, they say in the garden, and I've had images of that inside myself, but it's always been a meeting and almost like us sitting together. You know what I mean? It's been, I don't know how to put it into words, but
I hear you.
It's not a dogma thing.
No.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. No.
Oh, I can hit the mic. I just wanted him to elaborate on the cooking.
Elaborate on what?
The cooking piece you were talking about.
Oh, well, it's just a phrase, cooking, but by that I just kind of meant like it feels like cooking sometimes. In fact, there's even some, I don't know, Arvind might know the word, but there's some Sanskrit. Well, tapas means heat, and spiritual practice is often just referred to as tapas, and a lot of times it feels like it's not like obsession, because that has a sort of a individuated, lost, attached connotation to it, but it's more like a resolve, Well, when there's a desire for something or a sense of something, and so it's more like a resolve, and resolve has this more of an implication of kind of a steady determination, and at the same time you surrender the outcome. It's not like you have to surrender the outcome.
Like a attached to that?
Yeah, kind of like that. So desire doesn't mean attachment necessarily. Desire can be entertained in a way that is free from longing from attachment to an outcome. Like that verse I quoted, you have control over action alone, never over its fruits. Live not for the fruits of action, nor attach yourself to inaction. So you can be very motivated and determined and dynamic and all that stuff, but whatever the outcome is, like, okay, you know, on to the next thing. It's like there's no sense of sort of, I mean, it's not like you're not happy when something good happens or disappointed when something doesn't, but it's more like that's more like a little surface flavor rather than rocking
And the
your
outcome
whole
is the
world.
future.
Pardon?
The outcome is the future too.
Yeah.
So it's really not here,
Right.
right? And really, it's only here that
Yeah.
that it all exists, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's also part of it. The future doesn't exist; it will never exist, and it either opens or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then it's moving into a higher, greater wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There's that Einstein quote too. Something you said reminded me of it, which is that you can't solve a problem at the level of consciousness at which it was created.
Also, exactly.
Which kind of ties into, I mean, this is something that exists in many different traditions. Like in the Tao Te Ching, they talk about heat overcomes cold.
Heat overcomes cold.
Heat.
Oh, heat.
Which is activity. Like activity overcomes cold.
Yeah.
And then it says stillness overcomes heat. And then I just the other day I came across this other little one that was from Chuangzi, which says, though the master does nothing, her not doing is the opposite of inaction. So I think that three-phase model is helpful, you know, because, I mean, there are some things that you got to do something.
Sure.
You know, and it overcomes that cold, but there is a stillness that isn't cold, you know, that is actually beyond any sort of passion, or I don't know, but it's not like it negates passion. It's just
Well, it all arises from stillness.
right. Yeah,
That's where it all is.
and it's a type of practice, you know. It's or inquiry, or but I also appreciate what you're saying about don't deny it, you know. Don't like tamp it down, you know.
Because there are a lot of spiritual, you know, traditions and what, or at least interpretations of spiritual traditions that sort of downplay desire, or, you know, say you shouldn't have it, or, you know, anything like that. But it's as natural as, you know, breathing and thinking. I mean, we wouldn't eat without some desire to do so. So, and, you know, the enlightened person has desires. It's just that they're not rooted deep in the mind, and they're kind of more. They're in proper proportion to everything else.
And there's no one that grabs it.
Right.
And Tony, and then we'll end here.
Yeah, it was just something along the lines that's being talked about to do with shooting arrows, and some guidance that I got was that the arrow is intent. You shoot it first, then you look for the target.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah. Oh, that's right.